midst of the darkness, God has sent us His light. There's no need to be anxious. He will lead in our fight. If you've been called by the Savior, you will surely win. All you have to do is listen.
Welcome, everybody, to the Trust in the Lord Hour. I'm your Trusting in the Lord host, James David Righteous Rebel Manning, broadcasting from my studio located in our church building. And our church building is located in the community formerly known as Harlem. But God Almighty has changed the name of this community to Octalop. That's what God said. Well, we are continuing now today on the 14th version or segment of the Alpha and Omega series. And by the way, today, dating this, for those who will be listening to this a month from now or 3 weeks from now. However, today is the 14th of October, and guess what? This is our 14th segment of the Alpha and Omega segment. It's 14th, isn't it? Yes, it better be. And yesterday was the 13th of October, and we broadcast the 13th segment as well on yesterday. So I guess with some sort of rhythm. Not playing that way. However, we do want to look again at the Alpha and Omega event spoken by Jesus in Revelation chapter 20, verse 22 rather, where Jesus said that I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. We pray that you're familiar with that verse. If not, mark it down. Check it out. But Jesus does make that statement. Now, there are several things we want to try to accomplish today in this segment of teaching in the 14th segment of the Alpha Omega series. And number one is that the word Alpha means the beginning. And that's the Greek letter or Greek word for the alphabet, alpha. Greek for the beginning. And the word logos means the word of God, and the word theo means God in Greek. Now, what we're going to do here today is I'm going to read from several verses that said, because a number of very important things I want to try to cover today. Also want to ask the engineer or our program director if she is listening to pull up the article posted by Minister Marsha Hodges, Carpenter Hodges today regarding my statements regarding Jesus' interaction with religious leaders. Our program director, if you can do that for us, at some point we want to point that out. Okay, in Revelation chapter 22, verse 13, Jesus says, I am Alpha, me, and Omega, and then he restates it, or he defines what he is stating, but that's because he's speaking Greek there. It's, in English, he says the beginning and the end. And again in English, the first and the last. Let's read it again. Revelation chapter 22, verse 13, Jesus, speaking Greek, says, I'm Alpha and Omega. And then in English, he says the beginning and the end, and the first and the last. Now, what I want to do is I want to look at John's Gospel, chapter 1, and I want to just point up a couple of things I think are important for us. Look at John's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 1. Jesus says now, John is writing about Jesus, and he writes that in the beginning was the Word. Now, if you will, were we reading this in a Greek text with a Greek Bible and all the words are written in Greek, it would read, I don't know what the word in and the is in Greek, but the beginning would be Alpha, and then was, and the word would be logos. So beginning will be translated into Alpha, the word will be translated into logos, and the word was with God will be translated into theo. Theo is the name of is the theological name of God. Theology, of course, is the study of God. Theo, God, ology, the study, like biology, the bio, the study of plant and animal life. Biology, psychology, the study of the psyche. Theology, the study of God. So were we reading in Greek, it would read, in the theos, in the alpha was the logos, and the logos was the theos, and the logos was theos. All right. Just a little note for you to going along. It's very easy, very simple. Those are very simple words to remember. I want to look at a couple of things today in terms of our school pledge, and as the commitments that we have made as a congregation and as a school, and because we got our students listening. There are a couple of things. One is that our pledge, there are a couple of one of the last two pledges, and I'm going to come back to the theos, the logos, the alpha, the logos, and the theos, but our child, the Christ the King, Christ, child of the King, rather, it says, I'm a child of the King, his servant at all times. I'm strong, I'm blessed, I'm special because of the Lord. I'm chosen by God, a member of his royal family. I will succeed in all my studies because the Lord is with me. This pledge was written by me, 20, 25 years ago, and every student that's gone through our school system has had to repeat this every day. Now, it is an anthem. It is an attack. It is if you will, a casting out into the unknown, a certainty that the children of the outlaw school system will succeed. Not only that, but below that is the Hamite child of the King, because most of our students are Hamites. It says, I'm a Hamite child of the King. I pledge not to be racist against any ethnicity. It does not matter what color you are. All that matters is that we are one nation and one for all. We stand for righteousness. And when the world comes together as one, we will be the masterpiece that represents the glory of God. Let us all stand together until we die with righteousness and not with wickedness. Now, this was written by a composite of the students some time ago, about 5 years ago, maybe a little less. But one of the things I want the students to pay a very careful attention to with respect to the word matters. It says, I'm a Hamite child of the King. I pledge not to be racist against any ethnicity. It does not matter what color you are, all right? All that matters is that we are one nation and one for all. Students, I will detail that more, but as you know, there's a racist group that has formed itself since the inception pretty much of this writing, and they've used the word matters as a, if you will, utopian signal about their own ethnicity. So I wanted to say that to you. Now, okay, so let's get back to the alpha, the logo, alpha meaning the beginning, and logos meaning the word in Greek, and theo meaning God in Greek. So I've read from John's Gospel, chapter 1, where John makes that assertion, and then from Revelation chapter 3, where John the Revelator, a different John, writes in Revelation chapter 22, verses 13, about him being the beginning and the end. Now, we're continuing our telescopic journey, if you must, understanding systematic theology, so that we can better interpret God from the beginning and the end. And let me draw you up close to say to you that the God that created us would want us to know of a surety who he is. And in the 40 years that Moses was in the Sinai Peninsula or desert, he spoke to Moses on several occasions on Mount Sinai. And a large portion of that was the giving of the 641 laws that Moses came down off of Mount Sinai with, and out of that we get the excerpt of the 10 commandments, but there were 641 commandments or laws or references about the interpretation of the laws that God gave to Moses. It took some time for all of that, and not just that, but while Moses was on Mount Sinai, God gave him the history of the universe, starting with Genesis chapter 1, where it says in the beginning, in the Alpha was, God said, let there be light. God gave Moses in that 40-day experience the chronology of the events of humanity and up until the present time of Moses and the children of Israel parting the Red Sea and entering into the Sinai Peninsula. So the history and the chronology of the world as we understand it, and the progenitor, the creator of it being God, was all trusted to one man in knowledge, and that was to Moses. Now, what we're doing now, I want you to pay very careful attention to this. What we're doing now is that and that was before the children of Israel went over into the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey, which was once called Beulah land or Canaan land. Now we're getting ready to cross over into the 1,000-year reign of peace. And as that is, God is now giving us another chronology and understanding so that when we get into the 1,000-year reign of peace, there will be no mistakes. For instance, we cannot go into the 1,000-year reign of peace after the earthquakes, the famines, the floods, the wars, the rumors of war. We can't go into the 1,000-year reign of peace as Baptists. We can't. We can't go in there with that, if you will, sectist ideology. We can't go in as Methodists. And some go, we can't go into the 1,000-year reign of peace of God, or into heaven for that matter, as Baptists or as Methodists or as Catholics or as Church of God in Christ or Pentecostals or Presbyterians or Episcopalians. We cannot, please think on this for just a moment. In the 1,000-year reign of peace, which is prior to the new heaven and the new earth, we cannot cross over into that sacred land and sacred time prophesied by the Lord Jesus Christ through John the Revelator as sectarians. We can't go in as Baptists, and the Baptists disagreeing with the Pentecostals, and the Pentecostals disagreeing with the African Methodist Episcopals, and the African Methodist Episcopals disagreeing with the Presbyterians, and the Presbyterians disagreeing with the Catholics, and the Catholics disagreeing with the Unitarians. We can't go into the 1,000-year reign of peace with all of that sectarianism. When we go in, we have to go in as one people, a righteous people known as the elect. We have to go in as that. We cannot have different churches in the 1,000-year reign of peace where the devil has been bound for 1,000 years, that there'll be a church on one corner for the Baptists, a church on the other corner for the Presbyterians, and they're teaching various different ideologies. That is not going to work. That is not going to happen. And my job, my assignment is to preach righteousness. My assignment is to destroy these false religions of Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, Pentecostal. My job is to destroy all of them, so when we go in, we'll be of one Lord, one faith, and one baptism, one language, and one tongue when we go in. We can't go into the 1,000-year reign of peace with sectarianism and fighting one another. Otherwise, it won't be 1,000-year reign of peace. It'll just be the same old rigmarole and the same old mess we have now. We can't do it. I'm not an enemy. I don't hate people that go to the Baptist or the Methodist or Presbyterian or the Unitarian or the Quakers or the Friends. I don't hate those people. They're just wrong. They're just wrong. They just don't have the understanding of the Alpha. They don't have an understanding of the Logos. They don't have an understanding of the Theos. And what's more important, many of them are not well learned. They're not studied. And most, if not all, have not been called by God. We have got to go in as one people. We've got to go in as the elect and not as Baptists, as the elect and not as Catholic, as the elect and not as Methodist, because all of that means absolutely nothing now, and it'll mean nothing then. My job that I have accepted as an assignment is to be able to teach and explain that you're wasting your time sitting up in a Presbyterian church. You're wasting your time sitting up in a Baptist, Southern Baptist. You're wasting your time sitting up in those organizations, because they're not the organizations that God Almighty has called. world. And we need to have a clear understanding of the scriptures to be able to interpret all of this. But many of us are so enamored with the fact that our parents embrace these religious groups, these Baptists, these Methodists, because our parents embrace them. Somehow or other, we think that they're sacrosanct. They're not. They're not. They are not. They are not. They are not. But those that are, that will be, we will go into the 1,000-year reign of peace prophesied by Jesus as one group with one Lord, one teaching, and one church, which will be the church of the elect. It will not be a Baptist. It will not be Methodist or Presbyterian. And those things are pointless even now. So it's very important that we understand. And it's very important just that you stop wasting your time in these failed ideologies of men that really much have been put together by somebody who decided that this is the way that they want to govern their Christian ethics and ideology. So it's very important that we have this lesson about the Alpha and the Omega, the Logos and the Theos as we go forward. And it is my job to teach as unpopular as it is. As unpopular. You know, I've heard people say I was born a Baptist, you know, I am a Baptist and I'm going to die a Baptist. Well, you might be right about that, but that doesn't mean you're a Christian. It doesn't mean you're saved. Because you're born a Baptist and you die a Baptist, you're probably going to, and you should add, and I'm going to go to hell as a Baptist. That is not a form of salvation. And by the way, where did that word come from? John the Baptizer? It is important that we understand the urgency of the understanding of the unity of the people of God rather than all of these divisions. And by God, somebody, if you let them, some little preacher, some little man going to jump up, a woman going to jump up and say, I got an idea about, and I'm going to start a denomination called the whatever. And it just goes on and on and on. And it's all inspired by the devil for division and confusion rather than unity. So I'm very unpopular on this on that particular subject matter. I'm extraordinarily unpopular because people feel that, well, my mama was and my daddy was too. And so as a result of it, my ideology is sacrosanct or is right. It isn't. It isn't. And you cannot demonstrate it or prove it in the Bible that your Methodist or Presbyterian or Episcopalian or Catholic ideology is right. There is no biblical substantive verses that would demonstrate that. So we want to be clear about that, right? We want to be clear about it as we possibly can. So how did I, the good honor of Dr. Manning, arrive at this through the understanding of the practice of systematic theology by reading the Bible from day one. And then discovering that Moses in the wilderness gave a unity of Jews. They came out all as Jews, not as Jews and something else. And I'll have to tell you, as unseemly as this might sound to some, anybody that was not a part of the Jewish faith, born of the Jewish faith, born of the Jewish blood, was not allowed to participate with the Jews, such as the Gentiles of the other nations. For instance, I mentioned in our last teaching about Siddhartha, the philosopher, if you will, that if you must, that exploited the whole idea of the Buddhist religion. Well, he did that in India at a time where the Jews were being carried into captivity by the Chaldeans under the leadership of Nebuchadnezzar, and they spent 70 years in Babylon. But by that time, by 500-600 year BC before Christ, the population of the earth has exploded to the point where India had become a major world, if you will, populist power. This is 600 years before the birth of Christ, 500 years before the birth of Christ, and Siddhartha was the one that gave definition to the Buddhist idea and Buddhist religion. But they were not accepted. And only the Jews were allowed into the promised land. And only the righteous elect will be allowed into the 1,000-year reign of peace. I tell you, your mama may be Baptist, she may be Methodist, or whatever it is that might be. And I believe that God will give me the opportunity to preach in such a way as to visit the people in prisons, that I might be able to visit them there and explain to them that grew up Baptist, but yet they were righteous, but they grew up Baptist because they felt they had to maintain some sort of relationship with their family members and friends that were all Baptist, or all Methodist, or whatever Presbyterian that they were. I believe God will give me the opportunity to explain that as well. All that's coming up. So this teaching of the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, so we can see clearly. Now we see what the beginning was. Now we can see what the Omega will be, what the end will be as well. So it's very important that we understand that. And of course, now, also last time we were together, as we turn a corner now, last time we were together, we talked about the two gardens. We talked about the Garden of Eden, where God put Adam and Eve out of, and then the Garden of Gethsemane, which we find in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 26, verse 36 and following, where Jesus was taken into custody by the Roman soldiers after being snitched on by Judas. He was taken into custody. And so we have these two gardens. We have the Alpha Garden and we have the Omega Garden, if you will. And I have to tell you that the way that we understand creation and the way that we understand the Bible is critical, and God's given us just the amount, enough knowledge within the Bible and what is known as the canonized books for us to make a clear decision if one has been anointed. Now, if I can turn a corner just briefly here for just a moment, I pointed out last time we were together as well, when we look at Jesus in particular, we look at Jesus, there are several things about Jesus that fascinates us about. Number one, in the four Gospels, we are fascinated by the miracles. We perhaps never witnessed anybody, save Moses, who performed as many miracles as did Jesus. Now, Moses did perform some mighty miracles, there's no doubt about it. But we're more fascinated with the miracles of Jesus because the miracles of Jesus are more relative to our present health conditions, more so than national political conditions that Moses dealt with Pharaoh, with the frogs, with the river turning to blood, with the opening of the Red Sea, with the locusts, with the death of the firstborn, with the flies. And those are more of a national and a political warfare type of miracles, not necessarily for us as intriguing as, the healing of the blind eyes and the man at the pool of Bethesda and those kinds of miracles that Jesus wrought. So I think when you look at a lot of the way most of these denominations have come about, they've come about because of our fantasizing, if you will, over the miracles. For instance, let's take the Pentecostals, for instance. They are enamored with the tongue talking event on Pentecost, on the day of Pentecost, which was a religious holiday. 50 days after the harvesting of the crops was Pentecost. Penta represents 50. Or 5, the pentastar, the 5-pointed star, the penta, and Pentecost represents the 50th days since the Passover was, and so on that day, the Holy Ghost fell on the 120 in the upper room, and people they've just divined a religion out of that and taken as an excerpt out of that, tongue talking as a principle of salvation. It's wrong. It's it's not even biblically supported, but people come up with ideas like that, and they march ahead with them, preaching it as they go. So people are fascinated with various miracles. For instance, the apostolics who believe in Jesus only, though Jesus said, baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Paul, just writes about Jesus, and the apostolics said, well, we're going to only baptize in the name of in Jesus only. We're going to do everything in Jesus only, which again is an erroneous way of ideology in terms of and also a separation of people from the actual power of God by being in the wrong place. So the miracles are important. Then the parables, people have some of the parables that are very important, very popular, I should say. The parable of the prodigal son, probably one of the more popular ones, the prodigal son, because people relate to that. Boy got mad with his daddy, young, crazy as all outdoors, demanded his money, told his daddy that I'm leaving here, I'm sick and tired of listening to you, and went out, wasted all his money, and then discovered that the people he thought were his friends were not really his friends at all. And when he found himself down in the dumps, he looked up from a hog trough and said, I'm going home to my daddy and act like I got some sense. That is such a great parable because so many people people when young, you make mistakes, and then older people make similar mistakes. You think you just don't see the future and you don't see the wisdom. I find it an important parable as a pastor of this church. So many young people have gone out from this church. Pastor Manning is this, and he ain't that, and he's too strict, and he's this, that, and the other, and on and on and on and on. And I want to go out and do my own thing. I want to be free. I want to do my own thing. And then years later, they find themselves older, eating out of a hog trough, and look up and said, when I was in the outlaw church, I was in the outlaw school system. When I was with Pastor Manning, we just had everything. Never warned for anything. We were greatly protected. We were treated royally. We traveled around the world. And now look at me now. I ain't got enough money to get on Subway. And I think I'm going to go back. Many should say they don't. Many should say, I'm going back to Pastor Manning. We can look at one of our El Capitans like Captain Elijah Lewis, who was here, one of the first males to graduate of our high school, then went out and did his own thing. Thank God he got wisdom. The boy must be full of it, because he turned around and said, wait a minute, I'm going back home to Pastor Manning. He came back and sat and talked with me, so I want to come back home like a prodigal son. Well, it's a beautiful description of the Captain Lewis, and it's a beautiful description for humanity, and especially for you young people. There are young people listen to me now, that you were in the outlaw church, and then you decided, well, I'm going to do my own thing. And got out there and discovered it ain't what you thought it was, and want to return home. Now, there's some, the door's been closed and you ain't coming back. But others, there's a possibility for that as well. And then, of course, there is the parable of the 10 virgins, the 5 wise, the 5 foolish. And what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back after I take a brief break. And remember that when we walk through the beautiful waterfall, and we're going to the 1,000-year reign of peace as the elect, after most of the earth has been destroyed, most people have been killed, the earthquakes and all of that has happened, and it'll just be the elect people as spoken by Jesus in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 24, verse 22 and verse 31, that when we go in, we're not going to go in as Baptists or Pentecostals or Methodists. We're not going to go in as Charismatics. We're not going to go in as Southern Baptist. We're not going to go in there with all that mess. It's foolishness now. It is absolutely mess and foolishness, and has nothing to do with the sanctity of God. All these people sitting up in the Methodist Southern Baptist Church, you're wasting your time. And you will not carry that garbage into the 1,000-year reign of peace, the land of peace, because if you did, wouldn't be no peace there then. So you can bet your last money that you're in the wrong place unless you're under the banner of righteousness of the elect. All right, I'm going to take a break, and I'll be right back with more of this teaching. I'm James David Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant.
God says, I'm growing weary of all your feasts and sacrifice. When you assemble before me, but you ain't been living right. I've seen you shout, I've heard you sing, but all that noise don't mean a thing till you break the bonds and loose the chains. I tell you that's my kind of praise. Help someone else before you pray. Still my favorite thing to hear is the sound of feet out visiting. I tell you that's my kind of praise. That light will break through. I'll make a way. When you're in trouble, just call my name. I'll be your rock. I'll guard your way. You'll be my witness every day. And see your works. Glorify my name. I tell you that's my kind of praise. And see your works. Glorify my name. I tell you that's my kind of praise. I tell you that's my kind of praise. I tell you that's my kind of praise. But you can sing anyway.
Now that the coronavirus, a lot of people are afraid to send their children to schools, especially the public school system, and I tell you, I don't blame you. It is very risky in the public school system, and so a number of parents have taken to homeschooling. And if you're out of state or even out of the region of New York City, the 5 boroughs of New York or the northern part of New Jersey, and you want to homeschool your children, let us be a homeschool assistant. We have a bona fide jam up and jelly tight education system here at the Outlaw School System, from kindergarten all the way up through high school, and we do a great job. We produce lawyers, doctors, architects, artists. I mean, God has literally laughed on us as an education institution, and it's just given great blessings. Some of the best institutions in America, our students are accepted at. And we recently had one of our students graduate cum laude. That's the first. That is a first, and we need to make note of that. While we have students that have been accepted at Yale, at Juilliard, at New York University, and a number of other very prestigious schools, our first cum laude has happened in our institution, and that's a first that we need to make sure that the education system, the Outlaw School System acknowledges that. But what I want to say to you, if you're planning on homeschooling your children, register with our online homeschool assistance program. We have an online homeschool assistance program where you can register. You're living in Houston, you're homeschooling your children, but we can come alongside you every day, and we'll assign a special teacher to work with you and your children so that they will not be completely isolated. And you know that even though you're the parent, you're not fully qualified to teach them in every subject matter that they need to be taught in. It will be a wise thing for you to call our ministry at number 877-777-0734. Ask to speak to Elizabeth Manning. The number is 877-777-0734, and ask to speak to Elizabeth Manning. The number is 877-777-0734, and ask to speak to Elizabeth Manning. And go ahead and let us work alongside of you, because you, as loving as you are as a parent, you just aren't qualified to do all that is necessary. We can be of great assistance to you on your schooling program for your children. You will come in contact with someone who is infected with the coronavirus. And you can be right there in your own home, on your own doorstep. You are going to come in contact with someone who has the coronavirus.
On Thursday, March 5th, Heather Bauer went to a casual dinner party in her town of Westport, Connecticut. 4 days later, she felt achy and feverish. She had a temperature of 101. 5 days after that, she was in the coronavirus ward at Yale Hospital, fearing that she would die.
I believe that as many as 20 to 40,000 people from Fort Greene to Harlem, New York City will die.
A well-known ER doctor here in New York who battled to save the lives of so many others. Her family now says she has taken her own life.
what we see happening is simply the hand of God in the dismantling of an unjust society.
They line up by the thousands, each one suffering, with a story that breaks your heart. Like 10-year-old Zachiel, the growing cyst on his neck threatens his life. He needs surgery now. And Revette, she needs help now, or she may never walk again. Their only hope is a ship unlike any other. Mercy Ships, the largest floating civilian hospital in the world, with volunteer medical staff and crew who come to save lives. 60 Minutes call Mercy Ships the intersection of courage and compassion. Their mission is both simple and remarkably challenging: to bring free surgeries and care for people who have no other hope. But they can't do this work without you. Please call or go online and join us now with your monthly gift of $19, just 62 cents a day, and you'll receive this limited edition Mercy Ships Crew t-shirt to show that you are a part of this amazing team.
Every human being has the right to be treated as human, to have a place at the table of the human race.
If you've ever wondered, how can I, just one person, make a difference? This is your answer. Call now or go to mercyships.org with your monthly gift of $19, just 62 cents a day. You too can be a hero. You can save lives. Mercy Ships saves thousands every year, but so many are still waiting and praying for surgery they could never get without your help. So don't wait. Please call or go to mercyships.org right now to give. Your gift of mercy can change a child's life forever.
Elder LaFleur and to Principal Butler, I want to establish as of this day in the training process of our high school and Great Tomatoes Elementary School, the Jatira Butler medical volunteer group, that we would recruit students, or students would volunteer as early as grade school, as long as there is a need for healing and for doctors or nurses or physician assistants or people who work in medical technology to prepare to volunteer a year of their time on a Mercy Ship, as we've just seen that particular promo that we're running and praying that people are donating to the Mercy Ship process. And we want to establish Jatira Butler as the director of this program under the authority of Elder LaFleur and Principal Madre Butler as well, that students that are so inclined to make a decision to volunteer to work on a Mercy Ship. As you know, the doctors and medical staff that helps those children in so many underprivileged nations all volunteer their services. So as of this day, and we will have more of a formal ceremony about this going forward, but it will be under the direction of Jatira Butler as the medical volunteers going forward. Now, as the 1,000-year reign of peace is coming, we're not going to need a lot of medical people, but as of now, as you can see, there is a great need. So let's get this Jatira Butler medical volunteer corps underway, and we'll have more discussion about it with our students as they prepare now for careers in the medical profession. All right, so now back to, I want to read Revelation chapter 22, verse 13. But we're back to the Alpha, we're speaking Greek now, the Alpha, the Logos, and the Theos, right? Jesus said in Revelation chapter 22, verse 13, I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. So Alpha is a Greek word for meaning the beginning, Omega meaning the end. And then he says it in English, the beginning and the end, and again in English, the first and the last. Now, going over to John's Gospel, chapter 1, we find John writing about Jesus, and he says in John's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 1, he says, in the beginning, which is the word, instead of beginning, we would insert the word alpha, and rather than the word, the Greek insertion there would be logos. So in the alpha was the logos, and the logos was with the Greek word for God is theos, and the logos was theos. In other words, John says that the logos and the word were the same. And then, of course, so we have that Greek understanding. In the alpha was the logos, and the logos was with theo, and the logos was theo. And in verse 14, Mr. Engineer, it says, in verse 14 of John's Gospel, chapter 1, it says, and the logos was made flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. In other words, the logos, which is the word, became flesh. And the logos was God, so God became flesh, when you understand. So when you read the John's Gospel chapter 1 in the Greek, it is fascinating, the Greek terminology and the actual native language that the New Testament is written in Greek. It's an inspiring read. So now, our purpose here now is to study both the beginning and the ends systematically, so we can be clear about the scriptures. We're not running around in tangents about this denomination and that denomination and one thing after the other, and missing the mark altogether. In fact, what God's going to do, he's going to get rid of all the denominations, and then we'll end up with one group called the elect, according to Jesus in Matthew's Gospel chapter 24, verses 22 and 31. So now let's get back to the fascination of how many of these denominations got started. So we have looked at the parables, and we look at the other fascinating things about Jesus is his choosing of the disciples and why he chose the ones that he chose. Now notice the disciples that Jesus chose were pretty much nobodies. They were not prominent religious leaders. By the way, you got to read Marsha Carpenter Hodges. I got to take my hat off for her pulling out that phrase about that I spoke the other day regarding Jesus and the way he responded to the religious leaders. Minister Hodges, I have to tell you that, I make these statements. I'm not afraid to speak God's word. I'm the Lord's servant. I'm not afraid to, but I know how unpopular such a statement as this is, that Jesus didn't have anything to do with the T.D. Jakes, the Creflo Dollars, the Joel Osteens, the Joyce Meyers, the Paula Whites, the Franklin Grahams, the Kenneth Copelands. He didn't have anything to do with the Brooklyn Tabernacles. He didn't have anything to do with the people, those kinds of people of his day. Jesus would condemn Brooklyn Tabernacle, T.D. Jakes, Creflo Dollar. He condemned Kenneth Copeland and Joel Osteen. He would condemn them now the way he condemned them in his day. And that was what this statement is all about, that Minister Hodges snatched out of my statements. And I have to tell you that I'm not afraid to say such, but I am encouraged when someone can hear this and realize that I'm speaking the truth. Jesus wouldn't have a doggone thing to do. In fact, he would condemn Joel Osteen and call T.D. Jakes not T.D. Jakes, but call him T.D. Snakes. And let me just read what Minister Hodges pulled out of an excerpt of my teaching. And she says, I've read and studied the Bible, and nowhere in the travels of Jesus do we find him interacting with the established religious order of the day. We never find Jesus agreeing with any of the religious leaders of his day. We just don't find it. In Micah, Hezekiah, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and all the rest of the prophets also did not agree with any of the religious orders of their day. That is why I rail against the religious orders of our day. Matthew chapter 23. Jesus never hung out with them, never preached for them, and was never invited to one of their religious groups. But he called them liars, hypocrites, snakes, son of snakes, blind, fools, etc. We're talking about the big-time religious leaders of Jesus' day. He said they were all blind and they were all fools. If you read in Matthew's Gospel chapter 23, and that's how I feel about the religious leaders of our day. That's a quote from Pastor James David Manning. You know, I am just so thankful that someone would hear that. I'm not afraid to say it. I know how unpopular it is to call T.D. Jakes T.D. Snake, because he is. He is. And all the rest of them. That you got a better shot at Jesus in the Brooklyn House of Detention than you do in the Brooklyn Tabernacle. And they're just a couple of blocks from each other here in New York City. Well, thank you, Minister Hodges. So when Jesus chose his disciples, there was a method by which he chose. He chose people that were pretty much not inside of the religious order. None of them were. And disciples that really did not have a whole lot to do with being popular or rich or powerful. There's one rich guy came to Jesus, but he was so rich, he had money and he didn't want to tithe and give his money to the poor, so he got turned down, or he turned himself down. Nicodemus, on the other hand, came and confessed that Jesus was Lord, but wasn't willing to get down on his knees and wash Jesus' feet. So he didn't make it either. But choosing the disciples was an extraordinary and interesting way in which we look at the Bible. And then where we're at right now in the Women, I Need Your Help teachings is, number 4 will be women and the interaction of Jesus with women, which I find fascinating. And I'm going to be preaching that this Sabbath, so be logged on or be in the church at 10 o'clock on this coming Saturday morning. I'm going to be, again, continuing the teaching, whether it be Samaria, or the women, the interaction of Jesus with women, as I continue to make my appeal to women globally, that I need you to help me the way the women helped Jesus in the way the disciples could not help him. And I'm going to be talking about the reward. If you give a righteous man a gift, then you'll get a righteous man's reward. I'm going to be drilling that in. That he that receiveth a righteous man, well, it says, he that receiveth a prophet in the name of a prophet shall receive a prophet's reward. And he that receiveth a righteous man in the name of a righteous man will receive a righteous man reward. And I'm both a prophet and a righteous man. So you're going to get a double whammy of a reward. Every woman that helps me, every person that helps me. We'll be getting back to that. But so now we want to be looking at that this coming Sabbath at 10 a.m., the Outlaw War Missionary Church, as I take to the pulpit for the Sabbath worship service. And then, of course, next time we get together, we're going to go over his greatest prophecy, which is Matthew's Gospel chapter 24, where he talks about the tribulation. But as for the time being, I'm going to take a break and get ready for the next segment. But we got some very important announcements that we want to put forward and a demonstration of the extraordinary talents that God has put in our church in terms of music. I know Give It Up has a new release. They've dropped the new song. I haven't found it. I got to find a way to get it up. I want to promote it here on the Trust in the Lord and the Manning Report as soon as I get an opportunity to do that for Give It Up. But I have some important things to say, so hang tight. And I'm asking if Elder LaFleur will make it mandatory that all students of the Outlaw School System listen to the next segment coming up in the Manning Report, because I'm going to be discussing the current, if you will, Senate Judiciary hearing on the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court as a new justice. So very important we go over these the information that's going to be critical for the educational process for our school. So students, you must hang in there for one more hour. So I'm going to ask the engineer to take us to some very important announcements, and I'll be right back. I'm James David Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant.
Purple Grace presents Purple Grace Exquisite Tea Affair. Now, this affair will not get you into trouble. Taste, drink, and fall in love. Order from Purple's Affair collection today. Do it right now. Want to give a beautiful gift to yourself, a loved one, or a friend? This affair will be perfect. Remember, this affair will not get you into trouble. But this is for any and everyone who desires to partake in this most unique, unusual, delicious, and refreshing affair. Order yours today, right now. Go to purplegrace.com or Purple Grace Tea on Instagram to get all the intimate details. Want a taste of heaven while here on earth? Then order from Purple's Strawberry Love Collection. A hibiscus like no other. Even the angels can drink this. Imagine that. You know you love it. You know you love it.
It isn't just about making bent legs straight. It's about enabling these children to re-enter society. Someday they can marry, they can get a job, they can work. It really, truly gives them their life back.
Their medical photos that we take kind of show it all. Their pre-op picture, none of them are smiling and they all look really scared. And then in their post-op picture, they have the biggest smiles on and they're so happy. I mean, it's only 2 pictures, but you can see that a journey has happened.
They never even dared to dream before, and now suddenly it's reality that they can dream and that these dreams could actually come true.
Let's get close to the Lord. Oh, yeah. Let's get close to the Lord. Oh, yeah. Living life from day to day. We so busy, lose our way. Well, my friend, just one thing to do. Let's get close to the Lord. Oh, yeah. Let's get close to the Lord. Oh, yeah. Smile with laughter, but inside still could not find peace of mind. There's a hunger, yes, it's true. We forget we were made for you. Let's get Abraham, Moses too. They fell down, but they get back up. Like Simon Peter in that upper room. Let's get close to the Lord. Oh yeah. Let's get close to the Lord. Oh yeah. All my shackles melt away. Precious promise, still the same. If we ask, then we receive. Even if we don't know what we need, let's get close to the Lord. Oh yeah. Let's get close to the Lord. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I know you think that I shouldn't still love you or tell you that. Well, if I didn't say it, well, I still have felt it. And where's the sense in that? I promise I'm not trying to make your life harder or return to where we were. But I will go down with this ship, and I will put my hands up and surrender. There will be no white flag above my door. I'm in love and always will be. I know I left too much mess and destruction to come back again. And I caused nothing but trouble. I understand if you won't talk to me again. And if you live by the rules of it's over, then I'm sure that that makes sense. But I will go down with this ship, and I will put my hands up and surrender. There will be no white flag above my door, 'cause I'm in love and always. And when we meet, which I'm sure we will, all that was there will be there still. And I'll let it pass and hold my tongue, and you will think that I moved on and
Welcome, everybody, to the Manning Report. I am Manning, the quintessential American, broadcasting from our studio located in our church building, and our church building is located in the community formerly known as Harlem, New York City. But God has changed the name of this community to Outlaw. That's what God said. We got a bright and sunny day. Unusual weather here in the Big Apple today. Temperatures pushing up towards the high 60s and the 70s on this 14th day of October, dating our broadcast here today. Got a lot to cover today. And for those of you who are listening in Sydney, Australia, or down in Texas, where Minister Hodges is listening, You might want to know that all of our students of our high school and grade school are listening to this broadcast today, because it's a very important time in the history of our nation, as we are 19 days and a wake up away from the presidential election on the 3rd of November. And perhaps one of the most contentious and perhaps one of the most participated elections in the history of our nation. In the process, going forward, before that, we've got a Supreme Court justice nomination that is now before the Senate Judiciary Committee, replacing the Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg is nominated now by Tribulation Trump as Amy Coney Barrett. That hearing is going on as you and I speak. We're going to dip in and out of it throughout the length and breadth of this broadcast today. But there's several things I want to say as we cover the broadcast, the nomination and what's going on. And we want to try to give those of you who may not be up on this whole business of Supreme Court justices, the history of it, the history of the court, some of its extraordinary rulings, and some of the questions that are being hurled, if you will, I might say, at Amy Coney Barrett, and why I believe that her nomination is plagued. I sent out a tweet earlier today just to be balanced that the regarding the fact that the Justice Kavanaugh and Justice Gorsuch was, well, first Justice Elena Kagan and Justice Sotomayor were nominated and placed on the bench by the long-legged Mac Daddy Obama, and that Justice Gorsuch and Kavanaugh were placed on the bench by Tribulation Trump, and the nomination by Amy Coney Barrett is now potentially a third justice on the bench by Tribulation Trump. And what I'd like to be able to do today is just go over some history of the court, if you don't mind. And there are several questions that are being asked of Amy Coney Barrett because of her previous writings and what is believed to be her very conservative point of view. And I'll have to tell you at the outset, I think that her nomination, though I consider her to be a brilliant jurist, if she makes it, and most likely unless there's, the creek rises, she'll probably get appointed to the bench, but it will not be an effective appointment. Like Clarence Thomas, as much as I respect Clarence Thomas as a justice, he came in such a cloud with the accusations made against him and all of the fighting that went on to get him onto the bench. He made it, but he has not become an outstanding justice. He certainly is no Thurgood Marshall, Clarence Thomas. And I am convinced that Amy Coney Barrett, even though if she makes it, will be muted because Tribulation Trump has already said prior to appointing her as a justice and prior to Ruth Bader Ginsburg kicking the bucket, that he wants to put someone on the bench that would overturn the Obama or the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare known as such, and also Roe versus Wade. He wants to put someone on the bench, and the Federalist Society and those that are backing her and putting the money up to promote her also want to say Roe versus Wade. And we're going to get into Roe versus Wade, when it was passed, what it was all about, throughout the length and breadth of what we're going to discuss here today. Tribulation Trump made the foolish statement of making that public before nominating anybody, which has put her in a box. And she has been squirming for the last 2 days, trying to avoid the fact when they ask her point blank, is it not true that you're being put on this bench for three things? One, Roe versus Wade, the other is Obamacare, and the third being, if the courts have to decide the election, if it's a close election on November 3rd, Trump says he wants a justice that will rule in his favor. And he left her nowhere to wiggle or to get out of this. And so she's pretty much ineffective. If she makes it, she's muted. She's ineffective. She's not because of her, mind you. Her academics are extraordinary. But because he who nominated her is such a corrupt individual, it leaves her corrupt. I mean, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch can kind of eke by, but Amy Coney Barrett is dead in the water, and she might make it to the bench. So let's talk a little bit about judges now. So in Revelation chapter 20, we find the Holy Ghost talking about judges. It says, Revelation chapter 20, verse 1, and I saw an angel come down from heaven having the key of the bottomless pit, that's the jailer, and a great chain in his hand, that's the handcuffs. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into prison, the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till all 1,000 years shall be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Verse 4, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given. In other words, John is saying, I saw more than one throne. I saw more than one bench of judges. Not just one judge, but I saw many judges, and judgment was given unto them. So, and how these judges of the biblical spiritual sense about heaven and earth, about wickedness and righteousness, is what I want to lead in with. But I want to also now revert back to our judicial system and how we choose our judges. Our judges are chosen for the Supreme Court, which is the highest court of the land. And really, I think I'm correct if I say you really don't have to be a lawyer, though I don't know if anybody who's ever been appointed to the court who is not a lawyer to be a judge. I'll have to double check myself on that if I'm somehow or another getting ahead of my skis on that one. But the Supreme Court judges are chosen by the president who is in office at the time. That's one of the godlike type of powers that the president has to put on the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is the third branch of the government. You have the executive branch, which is where the president and his administrators are Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, and all that kind of good stuff, if you will. That's the executive branch and his administration. Then you have the congressional or legislative branch, which has the House of Representatives, which is 400 and some people in the Congress, and the Senate, which is the 2 senators per state, 100 senators. So they represent the legislative branch. They make the laws. The judges don't write the laws. The Congress makes the laws. They pass the laws. The president signs them. And then if there's a question about those laws as they are applied at some point in time, which we're going to get into in just a few moments, it then becomes the burden of the court to pontificate and to give clarity about those particular those laws. So the presidential power to appoint judges is almost godlike. Mr. Engineer, if you could, thank you very much. The pardons is another godlike type of power that the president has. Now, most other powers he has to be legislated or negotiated, but he can pardon anybody he wants if it's a federal offense, and he can appoint anybody to the Supreme Court if he so chooses to do so. And then, of course, thirdly, and with less power, are executive decrees or orders that he can decide to just do something as the president of the United States. People can agree or disagree. Now, as we look at this event now with the Amy Coney Barrett, I don't know if we have her a screenshot of her going up. Now, if we do, it'll go up. Now, we don't want that fella. But as we look at her being nominated and and you can just hold tight for the moment, Mr. Engineer, as being nominated and the questions that she's being asked regarding her constitutional ideologies. There's several things that we need to be mindful of. One is that the Constitution, there was a young fellow by the name of David Barton, who was evangelical, who actually graduated from Oral Roberts University. Elizabeth and I, we went to Oral Roberts University years ago down in Tulsa. It's not one of the more popular schools today. It was taken over by Liberty University, became more popular than Oral Roberts. But David Barton wrote a book called The Original Intent. It was a bestseller on judicial practices of the Supreme Court. And David Barton's position really was a religious evangelical approach to the Supreme Court justices and their decisions as issues arose and disputes came before them. And the original intent, written by David Barton, and we may want to have one of our attorneys, such as Miss Nile River, come in and give a lecture to our school on the original intent. It's a fascinating book on the court, about the court. But original intent means that one needs to, when looking at the laws that were written by the Constitution by Ben Franklin, James Madison, and and all that, Adams and Madison and all that crowd, Jefferson, and everybody, when they actually wrote the Constitution in Philadelphia Hall and signed that bad boy, what was the original intent of the Constitution? What was their intent that the laws that they wrote were to mean? The original intent. And conversely, has that intent mutated, or have justices mutated that intent and taken what was initially stated by Madison, Jefferson, Adams, and Franklin and all that crowd, Hancock, and now superimposed on the original writing of the Constitution a modern day or contemporary ideology? And is that correct? So the original intent holds that when making decisions on the Constitution, one should, if one has that belief, David Barton writes, one should hold to the original intent. For instance, if you look at me and the Word of God, I am an original intent. I hold to the original writing of this. I don't take it and translate it and mutate it and try to make the Bible say something that Moses or Jesus did not mean to say. I don't do that. I am an original intent person on this Constitution. Original intent. So you're going to hear a lot about that in the discussion of the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett about the original intent. There's also another very important ideology, a philosophical idea that is applied to the justices that are on the Supreme Court, and whether they are known as original intent justices or textualist justices. I'm also a textualist. That is to say, it's a bit, in many ways, can be contrary to the original intent. By that, I mean that you look at the Bible in the context of the time in which it was written. For instance, when I pointed out that many in Luke's Gospel, chapter 20, verse 36, I believe, the Sadducees, which were part of the religious group of Jesus' day, did not believe in the resurrection. Indeed, they believed in reincarnation. Contextually, they believe in a Buddhist ideology that dated back some 500 years to 600 years before the birth of Christ. So you have to understand that verse, Luke 20, verse 36, I think I'm correct on that, in the context of which Luke writes that many of the disciples were not believers in the laws of Moses or in the resurrection. They believed in another ideology of reincarnation. So it has to be taken in the context. So many are textualists. So you're going to hear that discussion as they're trying to discover, well, where does Amy Coney Barrett come down on? Is she an original intent person, justice? Are we going to find her writing decisions based on the constitutional original intent, or is she a contextualist? Is going to be one of the questions that have to be discovered. Now, in many ways, David Barton wrote that the Supreme Court has become some sort of a religious board, if you must, and it has been, because most of the questions that have reached the Supreme Court that have been landmark decisions, such as Roe versus Wade, whether a woman has the right to have an abortion, that was passed in 1973, I believe, and I'll be correct on that date in just a moment. That was pretty much delving into the religious aspect. While it does look at the medical profession, and to some degree the legality of thou shalt not kill, So the Supreme Court, looking at that, has gone into a sort of religious, biblical ideologies, and do they override the biblical context? I think that one of the decision that's before the court now, the Obergefell, which is the decision that was granted in 2015 regarding same-sex marriage, that, first of all, the court did not have standing to make that ruling. Barack, the long-legged Mac Daddy Obama, pushed the court. At the time, the court was quite liberal in the Obergefell versus Hodges decision, where these two men wanted to get married, and they were denied the opportunity to do so, and the matter found its way all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the court ruled that man can marry man. Now, again, did the Constitution, when it wrote about man, did it in any way prevent men from marrying men? We know that the Bible prevents it. Does the Constitution now have the privilege, the right, to stand over against what the Word of God says? And of course, they did. And that particular decision is called the Obergefell decision, Obergefell versus Hodges, passed in 2015. But the court has a number of, and I think probably one of the more important decisions and one of the more standing decisions as of date. Not only has Roe versus Wade stood the test of time, but the 1954 court decision under Thurgood Marshall, and he was the one who prosecuted this case before the court, was Brown versus the Board of Education, where the separate but equal schools was just. Whereas in South Carolina, back in 1954, Hamite people could not go to school with Japheth people, that the school system had set up since the advent of after slavery, that, okay, the state would and county would finance schools for black children, but they would also separate, they would have to finance schools separately for white children. And the laws of the land at the time were black children and white children could not go to school. So at some point, I think Plessy versus Ferguson, which arrives out of an event that took place in Louisiana, where the separate school systems was then challenged, and the court then ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that they're separate but equal, where then the courts mandated, if you're going to have a separate school for black children only, then the economics of that school, the supplies, the functioning, the buildings must be equal to the same thing that white students have. Well, they're not going to allow the two of them to worship the blacks and whites to educate together, but their school system must be equal. So thus was born the term on the Plessy versus Ferguson. If I'm not mistaken on this, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm just kind of running past this from some of my history studies years ago. But Plessy versus Ferguson said that separate but equal was adequate. But Thurgood Marshall, a graduate of Howard University, challenged separate but equal. And he challenged it that it was unconstitutional, that you can't have a separate school system, even though you may apply the same amount of money to both school systems. You cannot deny blacks and white children to be educated together. And he won that decision in 1954. It's called Brown versus the Board of Education. It was a landmark decision, and it was a major victory for a so-called Hamite lawyer, who was Thurgood Marshall was, and that he was able to get that ruling, and it has stood the test of time from 1954. I might want to add that it was ruled in 1954 that all schools must be integrated. Black and white students must be able to go to school together. Yeah, and now I graduated in 1965 in North Carolina from an all-black school, because even in 1965, which was 11 years after Brown versus Board of Education decision, North Carolina still wouldn't integrate. White folks say, we ain't gonna have y'all coming out of school no matter what. I don't care what the court says. So I think it's important that we kind of look at that a little bit. And the legislation, however, as you know now, it is a blanket law across America, across the South and every place else, that schools are integrated. But the courts are the one that make such decisions about that. And the courts have also become sort of psychoanalysts on a whole lot of issues. So Amy Coney Barrett's position on the court is going to be very important going forward. If we could put her up, I think she's now being questioned by Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. And of course, she's responding to some of her questions. It's going to be very important, her ability to make decisions, whether she's an original intent person. And some of the court rulings that are now under threat are Roe versus Wade and the Obergefell versus Hodges, same-sex marriages, are presently going to be revisited. And with a majority of conservative judges, Roe versus Wade, which was passed in 1973, giving women the right to have abortions nationally, could be overturned, and women will no longer be able to go to their doctor and seek an abortion. That would be a major event for America, and they've been trying to overturn it. Evangelicals, Southern Baptists alike, and conservative Republicans, if you will, have been trying to overturn it since it was passed in 1973. And every year they have a march on Washington to overturn Roe versus Wade. But the Amy Coney Barrett has written in a very contextual way that she believes that Roe versus Wade is wrong, and that it should be overturned. And some of her early writings and some of the lectures she has given over the past 20 years at Notre Dame and in other places as a justice and a law professor at that Catholic school. So a lot of people are afraid if she gets on the court, women will have to go back to back rooms and into dark corners to have illegal abortions, because they will no longer be legal and doctors will not be allowed to perform them. Doctors performing them will be put in jail. So that people are very concerned about that going forward. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take a break right now, if you don't mind. And we're coming back with more of the testimony of Amy Coney Barrett and looking at this momentous, if you will, moment in our history, notwithstanding the fact that we're in the period of the tribulation. And what does this all mean? How much longer does the court have the power to rule? And once the tribulation has run its course, who will be the judges, and what kind of judgment will the judges of the post-tribulation period, and as I said, as I read in Revelation chapter 20, verse 4, and I saw thrones and judges and judgment was going to be given to men, and what will be the criteria? And I preached in a sermon not long ago that you can bet your last money that any preacher or person who says that the Old Testament is irrelevant, now listen, it's very carefully, any preacher who I can't imagine will, but there are who do it, or person, professor, or person, church attendee, that says that the Old Testament is irrelevant and that we don't have to keep the law anymore. Now think for just a second how ridiculous and preposterous that is, because to throw away the law, it would be like Amy Coney Barrett or Thurgood Marshall, who later sat on the court, or, if you will, Gorsuch or Kavanaugh, who sits on the court now and says that the Constitution, because it is old, it was written in the 18th century, is irrelevant. And we don't have to abide by the Constitution anymore. That's what preachers say when they say don't have to abide by the Old Testament anymore. If someone were to get up and say as a preacher in a church that we don't have to abide by the Old Testament anymore, it would be like Clarence Thomas or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or someone on the Supreme Court saying, we don't have to abide by the Constitution anymore. We can just make up things as we go along. We can legislate from the bench. So you have to realize what a scream it is, how ignorant, how ungodly, how far from God can anybody, I mean, even a sinner, the biggest adulterer, liar, the biggest mother stabber and father rapist, who would have enough sense to know you don't throw away the Old Testament. You don't do that. Same as you don't throw away the Constitution of America. You don't throw away the U.S. Constitution. You don't do that. But there are preachers who are saying, throw away the Old Testament. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine? So it's very important as we watch this court proceeding, as we understand the original intent of the Bible and the original intent of the Constitution. I'll be right back, everybody. I'm James Evan Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant. You will come in contact with someone who is infected with the coronavirus. And you can be right there in your own home, on your own doorstep. You are going to come in contact with someone who has the coronavirus.
On Thursday, March 5th, Heather Bauer went to a casual dinner party in her town of Westport, Connecticut. 4 days later, she felt achy and feverish. She had a temperature of 101. 5 days after that, she was in the coronavirus ward at Yale Hospital, fearing that she would die.
I believe that as many as 20 to 40,000 people from Fort Greene to Harlem, New York City will die.
A well-known ER doctor here in New York who battled to save the lives of so many others. Her family now says she has taken her own life.
What we see happening is simply the hand of God in the dismantling of an unjust society.
These scenes at a hospital in Central Africa may look like an emergency, but at Save the Children, we see this throughout the world every single day. Among the new arrivals is Kayembe. So frail, he can no longer stand. Kayembe is almost 2 years old, but his weight is less than half that of a healthy child his age.
5 cas graves de malnutrition.
Kayembe is slowly dying. He needs food, and he needs medicine urgently. These are the basic things that you can help us provide by calling the number on your screen now and giving just $10 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. We know what it takes to save lives. It takes us, you, and as little as $10 a month. Save the Children is on the ground in the U.S. and all over the world, but we need your help to deliver life-saving medicine, medical care, clean water, and nutritious food to children in desperate need. For a child as critically ill as Kayembe, a single phone call can make the difference. Please, pick up the phone now. For less than 35 cents a day, you can help us save a child's life. Call now, and you'll receive this special Save the Children tote bag as a thank you for your support and a reminder of the difference you're making in children's lives. Every day, 19,000 children die from preventable causes. That's one child every 5 seconds. But it doesn't have to be this way. For just $10 a month, you can make a difference. Please, don't put this off. We need your help to get these children the critical medicine, food, and clean water they urgently need.
S'il n'y a pas assez de nourriture à donner aux enfants, les enfants vont mourir.
Call Save the Children now and help us save a child's life.
And we have an historic event going on. We're now 19 days in a wake-up before the November 3rd election, probably one of the more contentious elections in American history and probably one of the most participated elections in American history, where Donald John Trump is running versus Joseph Biden for the presidency of the United States of America. And there's been a tumultuous time over the past 4 years under the Trump presidency. Of course, we're also battling COVID-19, where more than 215,000 people have died, and the scientists and virologists and epidemiologists are forecasting that another 200,000 people will die between now and, pardon me, and the 1st of February. So we're at a critical time. We're in a tribulation. Of course, it doesn't seem like that to those who are unbiblical, but we're in God's ordained, preordained, prophesied tribulation spoken by Jesus in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 24, which will explain why we have so many horrific things going on all at one time. Today, the hearing is going on Capitol Hill in the Senate Judiciary Committee, led by Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, querying President Trump's nominee to fill the vacant seat on the Supreme Court left by the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And that person is Amy Coney Barrett. In my estimation, who I think is a brilliant, if you must, jurist. I think she's quite intellectual, although she did not attend an Ivy League school, which should be the first justice on the Supreme Court in quite some time who did not go Ivy League or graduate Ivy League. And I think she's a scholar. I do. And moreover, I think to some degree she's a humanitarian in as much as that she's a mother of 7 children. 2 of those children are adopted from Haiti, a young girl of about 15 years old and a young boy of about 12 years old that she was able to successfully legally adopt from Haiti, and she's raising them as her own children, she and her husband. I think that's quite noble and quite humanitarian of her. And then she has her own 5 children that she gave birth from between her own feet, children. But I think that she is tainted and will forever be muted in her talents and gifts, whatever they could have been, have now been disqualified because of the person that nominated her, and that is Tribulation Trump. Nominated her under a hail of public statements that he made, such as, I want someone on the bench that can decide the election in the event that the election has to be decided by the Supreme Court. I want somebody that will rule in my favor. He has stated that publicly, and everybody's heard him. And she's been asked that question by every Democrat senator on the committee, and she's dodged it. She's obfuscated, and she's plain just tried to walk away from it, which has discredited her in unusual ways, which makes her, if she makes it to the court, makes her a mute person, that she no longer, her candidacy will no longer have any effect whatsoever. Pretty much like Clarence Thomas, who came to the court under a hailstorm as well. But having said that, I think also she's written some things that I think makes her not necessarily an original intent person. What I think she would pass herself off as one. I think she's a contextualist in as much as that she seems to, for instance, on the many of her writings, she seems to indicate that if she were given the opportunity on the court, she would rule against the Roe versus Wade and same-sex marriage. Now, I'm against both of those as well. However, I think that as a jurist, to pronounce before going to the court that you would do that disqualifies you, because you never know what the context will be under which that Roe versus Wade, the Obergefell versus Hodges event would come before the court. All right, having said that, so Roe versus Wade was passed in 1973 by the Supreme Court under the fictional name of Jane Roe. And it has been the law of the land. But it's been challenged ever since it was passed in 1973. And a large number of people, of evangelicals, if you will, and so-called Republicans and conservatives have sought to try to overthrow it. It has stood since 73. How much longer it will stand, we don't know. But I want to go back to the court history in terms of its decisions back to 1857. 7 years or 8 years before the ending of slavery, there was a fellow by the name of Dred Scott, who was born a slave, I think one of the southern states, South Carolina, or someplace like that, and then later moved to Indiana later moved to one of the northern states, Ohio, where he was also a slave in Ohio, but or Missouri, I'm not sure which now, pardon me. I'm not a constitutionalist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just trying to remember this from my history lesson years ago. But he moved to either Missouri or Ohio from a southern state such as South Carolina or maybe Alabama, and then he was purchased by a white slave owner who then lived in Indiana. And at the time, Indiana was a free state. So when he was purchased by the white slave owner, a white man, I should say, in Indiana, and he moved to Indiana, he was thus free. But he had been born a slave. And, people moving from free states to, like Harriet Tubman was moving slaves who were escaping slavery in the South, moving to the North, but they never stood up and said, we're in a free state, we now declare we're free, because they realized the bounty hunters could come get them and take them back to slavery. But under this idea, the white man purchased Dred Scott and paid the price for him. So he was no longer had an owner. His now owner lived in a free state such as Indiana and declared Dred Scott free. But this was a threat to slavery everywhere, because slaves could then be purchased by abolitionists, that is, people who wanted to abolish slavery during those years, take them to a free state and declare they're free. So this matter went before the Supreme Court. Dred Scott himself filed a petition before the court, or at least he was aided by many abolitionists who filed a petition before the court, and it's finally made its way to the Supreme Court. And in 1857, the Supreme Court erroneously ruled that Dred Scott could not be free, even though he had been purchased and the price of his freedom had been paid for. He could not be free. It's called the Dred Scott decision. And the court went on to write several other things about he did not have the right to participate because he was considered 3/5 of a man. It was an awful decision by the Supreme Court, a very prejudiced, Southern-leaning Supreme Court at the time. And so it remains as one of the ugliest, if you will, Supreme Court decisions that would not let a man who was once a slave, purchased by a free man, taken to a free state, he still wasn't free. And in that decision, the courts ruled that the Constitution, in its original intent, I think the one who wrote for the court, the decision for the court, wrote that the Constitution, in its original intent, remember we discussed that original intent, the Constitution in its original intent did not mean to give citizenship to ex-slaves. That was a major blow to the abolitionists during those years who were marching to try to get all slaves free. And then, of course, in 1954 was the Brown versus Board of Education decision that was also one of the landmarks, and again regarding race relations. So the major decisions in the courts thus far have been about racial issues. Brown versus Board of Education, Dred Scott in 1857, Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. And then, of course, we have then the 13th Amendment to the Constitution passed and ruled on in 1865 led by President Abraham Lincoln, where the courts ruled that slavery itself was unjust and unconstitutional. And though there were still slaves, but that was a ruling, and the Constitution was amended since the Dred Scott decision said that the Constitution did not mean to recognize slaves. The Constitution then was amended. That is to say, well, we're going to have the Constitution legally vote to say that slavery is wrong, and it's considered the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And that held, and it still holds, and it's not been challenged. However, after that came the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which meant then, even after slaves were set free, in the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, saying that the Constitution meant that that men could not be held as slaves. They still couldn't vote. Slaves still couldn't vote, and they were still not considered citizens because the 13th Amendment, of course, did not take the court to that level. The 14th Amendment to the Constitution comes along a few years later and then states that any person born on American soil or any subject or any land that's under the subject of American authority or naturalized in America is indeed an American citizen, which now makes slaves who were born on American soil American citizens. For instance, you remember the big debate about John McCain and about Barack Obama, that John McCain was born in the Panama Canal Zone on a military installation that was considered U.S. land. He wasn't born in America. He was born in the Panama Canal Zone on the American installation. And the Constitution said if he's born any place that's subject to American authority, that makes him an American citizen. Now, Obama, on the other hand, the thing that I led a court battle on myself and took Obama to court right here in this church was that Obama was born in Kenya. And so as a result of that, he was not a natural born citizen. Now, he may have come in and lived here for a goodly number of years, but he was not a natural born citizen. According to the Constitution, he was not natural born. Now, there were a lot of people that got together and put together false birth certificates and all kinds of other things to try to make him natural born. But the fact of the matter is that his grandmother in Kenya said he was born in Kenya. There are a number of circumstances that leads to the fact that his mother flew to Kenya to give birth to him because of his father, Barack Obama Sr., who was a student in Honolulu and had come from Kenya. So she went there to give birth to him there, Stanley Ann Dunham. But he wasn't born in America. He became an American citizen, but he wasn't natural born. The Constitution says anyone who is not natural born cannot be a president of the United States of America. You can be a senator, you can be a congressman, but the reason why you cannot be the president of the United States of America because you have such immense power, and if you have allegiance to any other nation wherein you were born, is a threat to everybody else's freedom who are born in America, because you may choose to go with Kenyan ideologies rather than American ideologies. And so the Constitution was clear. You must be natural born in the 14th Amendment. And I challenged that up and down Wall Street and every other street during the early years of Obama's presidency. And he was not natural born. And he's never produced a birth certificate that indicates that he was absolutely natural born. I believe his grandmother. I don't think his Kenyan grandmother would lie and say that he was born in Kenya if he wasn't born there. And we do know that Stanley Ann Dunham did go to Kenya to give birth to him. Even though she was American citizen, he happened to be born in a place that was not under the subject of America. And by the way, in whatever it was, the year that Obama was born, I forget now, Kenya was a British subject. In other words, the Brits had colonized Kenya, and it was under the British subjugation. And so as a result of that, Obama was a British citizen, same way John McCain was an American citizen born in the Panama Canal Zone. So that was 14th Amendment of the Constitution. And the 15th Amendment, and these are some of the great, if you will, I don't know if we have the opportunity to demonstrate Amy Coney Barrett on the screen. Some of the great, if you will, the rulings of the court was the Dred Scott decision, the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And then, of course, the 15th Amendment to the Constitution was that all citizens had the right to vote. Even though the 13th Amendment of the Constitution abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution made ex-slave citizens, they still could not vote. So it wasn't until the 14th or 15th Amendment to the Constitution that voting rights were extended. However, they were not extended to women. but they were extended to slaves. It's a crazy, 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 crazy. So you had this women's suffrage movement that after the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, they finally, in 1920, were able to get voting rights for women as well. So the Supreme Court has ruled on a lot of very powerful decisions that govern our lives. And of course, the 15th Amendment was passed in 1870, a succession of things that were most probably put in place by the works of Abraham Lincoln and many of the abolitionists of that day. Now, a couple of things I have to wind up here today. There's an event called Stare Decisis. It's STAREDECISIS, which means, in effect, that a legal principle has been set in place that sets precedent, and it should not be tampered with. It should become the ruling law of the land, ruled by the court, and it shouldn't be challenged. Stare Decisis. And perhaps the most powerful stare decisis decision by the court has been Brown versus the Board of Education. It's not been challenged. Nobody's ever challenged it. However, Roe versus Wade has been challenged and will continue to be challenged. Obergefell in 2015, same-sex marriage rights will be challenged and most probably at some point will be overthrown. But stare decisis is important for several reasons. One is because I want to point out that the Bible has also its stare decisis. And by that I mean in John's Gospel, chapter 1, verses 1 in John's Gospel, chapter 1, where John writes that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That is a statement by John that was uttered by a disciple of Jesus, that Jesus is God. But it not just does it say that Jesus is God, it says that Jesus is his word. And it says that Jesus was in the beginning. In other words, that should never be challenged. No one should ever challenge and say that Jesus only became of importance when he was born on Christmas Day in Bethlehem in the year 1. That is ridiculous to say Jesus became of importance when he was born in Bethlehem. No, John asserts that Jesus was in the beginning, that Jesus is the Old Testament, that he is indeed that. And that should never be, now it's being challenged. But stare decisis says that it's a precedent, it's a statement by one who actually walked with Jesus, talked with Jesus. It's a biblical statement confirmed. And in John's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 14, it says Jesus, who was in the beginning, who was the Word, who was God, became flesh and dwelt among us. But that's not all. In this day of runaway, satanic, if you will, teachings by preachers who have never been anywhere near God, never been called. They just can dance and sing or play a piano, and they talk a lot, and they got churches. There's another stare decisis, a legal statute that has been set that cannot be challenged, and that is this in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 5, verse 17. Jesus is teaching himself in Matthew 5:17. Your mother told you when you see it in red, no, it's always Jesus talking. Jesus said, think not that I'm come to destroy the law. In other words, Jesus is saying, think not, don't you even dream that I'm going to destroy the Constitution of God. Like Amy Coney Barrett or Clarence Thomas or Thurgood Marshall or Neil Gorsuch or others should say, I'm not come to destroy the Constitution. I'm an original intent of the Constitution. I come to defend the Constitution. The Constitution written by Madison, by Hancock, by Ben Franklin, by Adams, by Jefferson, that Constitution holds as true, and I will not change it nor destroy it. Well, Jesus is saying that about the Bible, about the Old Testament, about the laws of Moses. Jesus said, think not that I come to say that the Old Testament or the law is no longer relevant. Don't you ever think that. Not only that, I'll take you one further. Not only is the law still relevant and vogue, but whatever the prophet said, I didn't come to destroy what they said either. I came to I came to support the original intent of the laws of Moses, the original intent of the laws, speeches of Ezekiel, of Jeremiah, of Daniel. I come to promote the original intent. I will not destroy. I will not say that the Old Testament is irrelevant. I come to say that it is irrelevant. That's a stare decisis event applied to the Bible. There's one other thing, and I promise not to inflict myself upon you any further, in John's Gospel, chapter 5. So you can imagine that Satan has actually taken over the tongues and the spirits of many people who destroy the law and the prophets. Jesus said in verse 45 of John's Gospel, chapter 5, again, a third stare decisis of the Bible, do not think I will accuse you to the Father. There is one that accuseth you, even Moses, in whom you trust, which is the law. Verse 46. For had you believed Moses, that is to say, believe the law, you would have believed me, for he wrote of me in the law. But if you believe not Moses, if you believe not the writings of the Old Testament, Christians, you Baptist people, you Presbyterian, you Church of God in Christ, you Methodist, if you don't believe the laws of Moses, how can you believe my words? Because Moses wrote about me. Stare decisis. So when I look at, I can hardly believe that, even to the preacher, the biggest shyster, the biggest liar, the biggest con man you want to see anywhere, he just looking to rip people off for what he can get for a big house or private jet. Okay, fine. But to be as stupid to say that the laws of Moses are no longer relevant, that we can throw them away, or better yet, to give people the liberty, give stupid, wanton people who are sexually wanton, who are aching and burning in their flesh, to do all things that are against the New Testament, to tell them you don't have to obey the Old Testament anymore. I can't imagine why he would even do that, but they're doing it now. So it's very important that we understand that we have good Supreme Court justices. Listen to me. When the Dred Scott decision was issued in 1857, saying that a black man, even though he had been purchased from his owner by a person and was living in a free state, still wasn't free. When you have the courts making such decisions like that, then it becomes very important to understand that you don't sit under any preacher who makes erroneous decisions about the Bible, that he must be an original intent of the Word of God. You go to a church and the pastor obfuscates the Old Testament, he's worse, and he denies you the power of the law. He's worse than the justices on the Supreme Court that said that a black man was not really a full man, and that even though he had been set free by purchase, he still wasn't an American citizen, he still wasn't a free man, and he was still considered a slave. That was ugly. It was wrong. Or the Plessy versus Ferguson decision that says separate but equal was right. That too was wrong. So when you sit under a preacher, understand my outrage when I see these preachers and these church people running around talking about the original intent is no longer applicable to our situation, that the laws of Moses no longer apply. You got to be understanding, my hair is on fire. How can anybody be such damn fools and yet hold a Bible in their hands? Why are they doing it? Because they are burning in their flesh. They are burning in their spirits to do all the wickedness that the devil has laid out before them. I'm an original intent person, and I will judge when the day of judgment has come. One final thing. The black robes, when a judge puts on a black robe, which is the other thing that happens in our courts, it should signify that he's covered himself or herself to be neutral, not taking this side nor that side, not taking the side of the LGBTQ against Pastor Manning and his church, knowing that he has every legal right to preach the Bible. I'm not going to take the side of the LGBTQ who have marched against him and have blasphemed against him, have tried to scandalize him, have tried to overthrow him and turn the neighborhood against him. I'm not going to take their side. I'm going to put on a black robe and I'm going to be neutral. And I'm going to apply the law and the decisions that I make justly on behalf of both parties. That's how we are to interpret what's going on in the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett today. I'm James Evan Manning, everybody. I'm the Lord's servant.
God says, I'm growing weary of all your feast and sacrifice. When you assemble before me, but you ain't been living right. I've seen you shout, I've heard you sing, but all that noise don't mean a thing till you break the bonds and loose the chains. I tell you that's my kind of praise. Help someone else before you pray. I want to bless if you'll obey. I see your heart, now mend your ways. I tell you that's my kind of praise. That all good music is mighty sweet. I like to hear it, but it ain't complete till you find a sheep that's gone astray and feed the poor along the way. Start cleaning up the mess you made. I tell you that's my kind of praise. The hymns you sing, sweet in my ear, but still my favorite thing to hear is the sound of feet out visiting. I tell you that's my kind of praise. That light will break through, I'll make a way. When you're in trouble, just call my name. I'll be your rock, I'll guard your way. You'll be my witness every day. Men see your works, glorify my name. I tell you that's my kind of praise. Men see your works, glorify my name. I tell you that's my kind of praise. I tell you that's my kind of praise. I tell you that's my kind of praise. But you can sing anyway.
Listen, men and women of goodwill, please hear me. Black Lives Matter must be defeated. The concept, their position of power at present, must be destroyed. Black Lives Matter must be destroyed.
The Lord has sent His holy word to free you from the chains of all the lies, the false leaders that you hold high. They've placed illusions